"Open up, Mr. Walker. Your wife is being taken into custody." The pounding on the front door rattled the frame so violently I half expected the glass to explode. It was the kind of knock you'd see before a battering ram on a police drama, except this wasn't television. This was happening on my porch, just after sunrise. The air was still cool, the light dim and hazy. Sarah and I had only been awake for 20 minutes. I was in the kitchen, halfway through my first sip of coffee, still in a frayed flannel robe and socks, when I froze mid-step, mug in hand, listening. The knocking returned, sharper and more forceful. "Daniel Walker!" a booming voice commanded, too loud for our sleepy cul-de-sac. "Step outside immediately." I glanced toward Sarah, who was walking down the hall, pulling her dark hair back into a tie. Her brow arched, wordlessly asking, "What now?" I set the mug down and edged toward the door. From the side window, I caught sight of movement. 4 bulky figures in matching dark shirts, boots, and tactical pants. The block letters printed across their backs spelled out, "Inspector." HOA Inspector. The uniforms looked like they came straight from a discount costume site, polyester catching. The morning light. Still, in formation, sunglasses covering their eyes, they might have passed for the real thing to someone groggy or naive. The tallest man rested a hand near a holstered weapon. I cracked the door open, chain still latched. "What's going on here?" The leader stepped closer and my stomach dropped. It was Greg Morrison, my neighbor. Greg and I had butted heads plenty over the past year, though never like this. He wore wraparound shades, a cap pulled low, and the same smug half grin that always made you want to slam the door in his face. "Step aside, sir," Greg said, trying his best cop impression. "We've received official reports of violations and a possible security concern. Your wife needs to come with us for questioning." I blinked at him. "Questioning? By the HOA?" His smirk widened as he tilted his head toward his crew. "Neighborhood safety isn't a joke, Mr. Walker. We can make this easy or not." Behind him, one of the inspectors shifted uncomfortably. Another glanced nervously toward the street. The sun was climbing now, and I spotted Mrs. Jenkins peeking out from her curtains. Sarah's footsteps came up behind me. She stepped forward in her charcoal workout jacket and fitted black pants, calm as ever. Greg straightened when he saw her. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Sarah's voice was like ice. "Do you have a warrant?" His mouth opened. What?" "A warrant. Arrest. Search. Any kind of paperwork?" she asked, voice polite but edged like steel. "Or are you simply out here playing dress-up?" One of his men coughed, trying not to laugh. Another stared at the ground. Greg's jaw clenched. "I don't need a document to protect this community," he shot back, hand brushing the grip of his pistol. But I'd seen enough real firearms to know his wasn't standard issue. Sarah didn't flinch. Her posture shifted, her calm confidence settling in. The same I'd seen when she diffused tense moments before. Greg had no clue he'd already lost. "Daniel," she said without looking at me, "call the sheriff's office. Ask for the duty sergeant. Tell them we've got 4 men impersonating officers on our porch." Greg sneered. "You're making a mistake." Sarah's reply was razor sharp. "No, Greg. The mistake is yours." The only sound was the hum of a neighbor's AC, then the faint click of a camera shutter somewhere down the street. Someone was documenting this. At the time, I didn't realize it was the first domino in a chain that would shatter our quiet life and pull us into something far darker than a neighborhood squabble. Just 2 years earlier, the thought of fake officers pounding on our door would have seemed laughable. Back then, Sarah and I were chasing something simple: peace. After a decade in San Diego, I was burned out as a civil engineer, and Sarah's job, which everyone assumed was security consulting, was deliberately vague. By our mid-40s, the city noise, the gridlock, the constant rush, It wore us down. Oakwood Heights looked like the escape we needed, a quiet development, close enough for me to commute, far enough to feel detached. Tree-lined streets, manicured. Lawns, neighbors who waved. Kids rode bikes until dusk. Doors stayed unlocked. We bought a 2-story Craftsman at the end of a cul-de-sac, with room for Sarah's training setup and my workshop. For the first few weeks, it felt like a honeymoon. We hosted a cookout, met neighbors, started evening walks. That's when we met Greg Morrison. At first, he was all smiles, tall, fit, late 30s, with a clean-cut police officer look. He told us he was both a cop and the HOA's safety chair. Whatever that meant, he played the role convincingly. He helped fix a pipe in my garage, complimented Sarah's landscaping, even introduced us at a block barbecue. If he was in uniform, he'd wave from his driveway, cruiser parked out front like a shield for the street. People bragged about having law enforcement living nearby. For a while, it was everything we wanted. Safe, steady, predictable. The first crack showed a year later when we replaced our fence. The wood was warped, and Sarah wanted more privacy. We followed every rule, pulled permits, even surveyed the property line, then hired a crew to install a 6-foot wrought iron fence. City code allowed up to 8. But as soon as work began, Greg changed. No more waves, no more chats. He'd stand in his yard, arms crossed, glaring at the crew. His wife started avoiding us altogether. One evening, Greg came by in a polo with a badge-shaped logo, close enough to suggest authority. "Mike," he said. He always called me Mike. "Would you consider lowering that fence to 4 feet? It blocks my view from the kitchen." I politely refused. Sarah needed privacy, especially for her calls. His smile tightened. "I understand. But as a representative of the HOA, community harmony should outweigh personal preferences." It was the first time he spoke like the HOA gave him real power. Until then, I thought his safety chair role meant planning block parties. I shut the door uneasy, but told myself it was harmless. In hindsight, that was the start of it. A week later, I opened the mailbox to find a letter on legal stationery. The HOA had declared our fence a violation of aesthetic standards. The penalty, $500 per day starting in 30 days. The legal jargon on the page crawled across my vision like ants. Sarah was mid-workout in the backyard when I brought it to her. Dressed in her usual black athletic gear, hair tied back, she barely looked winded despite just finishing a round of burpees. She scanned the letter once, shook her head, and said flatly, "They don't have this authority. We've got permits. Everything's within city code." There was no hesitation in her voice, just certainty, like she already knew every rule, inside and out. Still, I wasn't going to challenge a law firm without verifying. I dialed the number on the letterhead. The receptionist sounded confused. "Sir, we don't have any record of your address, and we definitely didn't issue a notice about a fence." "So this is fake?" I pressed. "Silence, then. If someone is using our firm's name without permission, that's a federal crime. Could you send us a copy of the letter?" By the time I hung up, my hands were trembling, part fury, part realization. This wasn't Greg throwing a tantrum. This was planned. At dinner that night, Sarah was unusually quiet. Between bites, she slipped outside for phone calls, speaking in clipped tones I couldn't catch. When I asked if it was work, she gave me a tight smile. "Complicated," was all she said. Over the next week, the neighborhood cooled toward us. People who once waved now crossed the street. Mrs. Patterson, who once brought cookies, avoided eye contact altogether. Then the notes began appearing, tucked under wipers, taped to the mailbox, slipped in the doorframe. At first, they were sugary. "Please consider cooperating with the community for everyone's sake." But soon, they sharpened. Outsiders don't understand how good neighborhoods work. Different handwriting, different paper, but always the same sentiment. Sarah noticed everything. She started making more calls outside, her tone edged with professional precision. language that wasn't quite military but tactical, and I began seeing her differently. The way she always chose the restaurant seat, facing the exits. The way her movements were economical, efficient. The way she could size someone up instantly. Greg wasn't satisfied with whispers. One Saturday, he staged what he called an emergency HOA meeting, right on the sidewalk in front of our house. Nearly 20 neighbors gathered. He had a sign propped up reading Neighborhood Security Chairman like it was an official title. Gesturing toward our half-finished fence, he declared, "The walkers are refusing to comply with community standards. This isn't just about looks. A fence this tall could conceal suspicious activity." A few nodded. Some looked uneasy. Then, Greg dropped the hammer. "I've run a background check on our neighbors. Sarah Walker works at a classified facility, and her job description is marked confidential. For all we know, they could be a threat to national security." Murmurs spread. People stepped back. I stood at the window, fists clenched. "He can't say that," I started, but Sarah cut me off, calm but sharp. "He can. And he just made the worst mistake of his life." After that spectacle, Oakwood Heights changed. The weather was the same, but the atmosphere wasn't. Where once neighbors stopped to chat during walks, now conversations died the moment we appeared. Smiles thinned, eyes looked away. Growing up in small-town America, I knew what it looked like when gossip took root. Greg wasn't planting rumors. He was broadcasting them with a bullhorn. One afternoon, I saw him in his driveway with Mr. Callahan. The second I appeared, the chat stopped. Greg clapped him on the shoulder, muttered something, and Callahan walked off stiffly, avoiding my eyes. Within days, the notes resumed. "Please work with the community, maybe lower the fence." Again, all different handwriting. Greg had rallied others to do his work. Sarah collected every single one, sealed them in Ziplocs, labeled, and filed them away. She didn't comment, just stacked them in a half-full box in her office. If the cold shoulders and anonymous notes were the soft tactics, what came next was hard pressure. One Wednesday at 9 p.m., I heard voices outside, not idle chatter, but deliberate. Peering through the blinds, I spotted Greg with two unfamiliar men, pointing toward our side yard and nodding like they'd sealed a deal. The next evening, after dinner, came a knock at the door. Firm, not violent, but loaded. Greg stood there, in his dark polo with the fake badge patch. His arms were folded, smile thin. "Evening, Dan. Just a reminder about Saturday morning's neighborhood safety inspection. HOA protocol. We'll be making sure everyone's in compliance." I kept my hand on the door. "Is that a real policy or something you just invented?" Greg tilted his head, mock patient. Best to cooperate. Refusing inspection sends the wrong message. That night, Sarah and I sat in the living room, TV murmuring in the background. She scrolled through her phone, brow furrowed. That look I knew meant deep calculation. "He's escalating," she said finally. "Saturday isn't about safety, it's intimidation. He'll bring his little squad, stage a violation." I leaned forward. "So what's our move?" She looked up, eyes steady. "We let him come. I'll be ready." But the showdown arrived early. 2 nights later, at 2 a.m., the power snapped off. The neighborhood plunged into silence. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel, low voices, the metallic click of a gate latch. I peeked through the curtains, 4 figures in tactical pants and navy shirts. For a second, I thought SWAT. Then I read the block letters on their backs. HOA Inspector. They wore earpieces, caps, even carried clipboards, as if that made it legitimate. It might have been laughable if 2 of them weren't armed. Greg led the group, flashlight beam slicing across our windows. He climbed the porch and pounded the door. Sarah was already at the top of the stairs, dressed, alert, posture sharp. She didn't look surprised. "Stay here," she told me quietly. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Greg's knock rattled the frame. 3 heavy booms that seemed to echo through the dark. HOA inspection, he shouted. Open the door. Sarah didn't rush. She descended the stairs like she was walking into a meeting she'd already prepared for. Calm, deliberate steps. My pulse thudded in my ears as I followed. She flipped on the porch light, flooding the scene outside. 4 men stood there in their navy shirts with HOA inspector printed in bold. 2 carried clipboards, 1 gripped a flashlight like a baton, and Greg stood front and center, hand resting on his pistol. Sarah unlatched the deadbolt, but kept the door cracked. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Greg's lips twisted in that smug smile. "Reports of unusual activity on your property. HOA protocol requires immediate inspection." Sarah glanced at the letters on their shirts, then back at him. "At 2 in the morning?" she asked. Greg's smirk didn't fade. "Some things can't wait." "We can handle this the easy way," Greg started, but Sarah interrupted sharply. "Show me the documents." Greg blinked. "Documents? Yes. Any official paper that gives you the right to stand on my property at this hour. A search, warrant, an HOA order, something with an actual signature." One of the men behind Greg shifted uneasily. Greg," he muttered. Greg snapped at him before turning back to Sarah. "I don't need to show you anything. I'm law enforcement." "This neighborhood is under my authority." Sarah tilted her head, studying him. "Your authority?" "That's right." Greg puffed out his chest. "I've been keeping this place safe long before you showed up. I don't need approval from you." Sarah opened the door slightly wider, just enough to stand firmly in the doorway. The porch light glinted off the silver pin on her collar. "You're on my property at 2 a.m. without a warrant, armed, and pretending to be an officer. That's a serious list of charges, Greg." Greg's eyes darted to the pin, then back at her face. "Don't try to scare me." "I'm not," Sarah replied evenly. "This is me being civil." Silence thickened between them. Greg's companions no longer looked so confident. One stared at the ground, another glanced toward the street like he was ready to bail. Greg tried to push forward. "Step aside, Sarah. I need to make sure this place is safe." Her voice dropped, calm, low, and controlled. "Greg, if you cross this line, you'll be trespassing, and you'll leave in the back of a real patrol car." His jaw flexed. I could see him calculating. Was she bluffing? The standoff stretched taut. Then Sarah's tone shifted, still calm. "Daniel, call the sheriff's office. Tell them we've got armed men impersonating inspectors at our door. Ask for the duty sergeant." Greg's face flushed red under the porch light. "You're making a mistake, Sarah." "No," she said, eyes locked on his. "The mistake is yours, and time's running out for you to walk away." For a second, I thought he'd do something reckless. His hand twitched near his holster, but the man with the flashlight whispered something, and Greg finally stepped back. "This isn't over," he hissed, pointing at her like a warning. "You're right," she replied steadily. "It isn't, but next time you'd better bring real law with you." Without another word, they turned and disappeared into the darkness. 5 minutes later, the lights flickered back on. I locked the door and turned toward Sarah. She stood at the window watching until they were gone. "Who are you, really?" I asked. She didn't answer, not yet. But I knew that revelation was coming. And when it did, our quiet suburban life would never look the same. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Sarah lingered at the window, her eyes fixed on the street until the last glow of their flashlight vanished. Finally, she turned. "We should talk?" I followed her into the kitchen, my mind racing. The fake uniforms, the guns, Greg's smug attitude, they all replayed in my head. "Sarah, what the hell was that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't snap back. She calmly set a kettle on the stove, filled it, and lit the burner. Only when the hiss filled the air did she speak. "You've been wondering." About me for a while, haven't you? Her question threw me off. What does that have to do with Greg showing up? Everything, she said simply. The kettle rumbled, steam rising. She placed her hands on the counter and met my eyes. My name is Sarah Walker. I'm this county's elected sheriff. I froze. That was the last thing I expected. Sheriff? I repeated. Yes, 15 years in law enforcement, 10 in this office, elected last year. She let it sink in before continuing. I didn't tell you because I wanted us to have a normal life. But after tonight, normal's gone. I tried to process it. I thought you were in private security. That's what I let people believe. This position makes enemies, the kind with money, power, and grudges. Keeping my personal life separate keeps us safe. Her words hit hard. I leaned back, feeling the weight of it. So Greg is dangerous, she cut in. He's not a neighbor with a fake badge. He's committing a felony. Armed trespass, impersonating law enforcement. I could have had them cuffed on the lawn before the power came back. But I needed to see how far he'd go. Now I know. He'll escalate, and that's his weakness. She poured boiling water into 2 mugs, handed me one, then pulled a small recorder from her jacket. I recorded everything he said tonight. It hit me. She'd been prepared for this all along. What's his end game, Sarah? I asked. I don't know yet, but people like him don't risk this much over a fence dispute. Something bigger's in play, and now, her lips curved into a cold smile, now he's my case. For the first time, I felt something other than fear. Greg had no idea who he'd picked a fight with. Sarah took a sip of tea. Tomorrow, I start digging. Greg Morrison's about to regret ever crossing me. By the next morning, she was already at the dining table, laptop open, notes spread out, her coffee untouched. The intensity in her face reminded me of someone preparing for battle. Morning, I said groggily. She didn't look up. Greg Morrison doesn't exist. That jolted me awake. What do you mean? I mean, he's not a sworn officer anywhere in California. Not even licensed as security. He doesn't exist. I stepped closer, staring at the blank database screen. So, who is he? That's what I'm finding out. She pulled up another database only sheriffs could access. We screen. New hires this way. I'm running him now. The hard part is uncovering his real name. It didn't take her long. A quick check of the property database showed Greg's home wasn't under Morrison at all. It was registered to Gregory Mitchell. Sarah typed that name into her system, and within seconds, results flooded the screen. She read them off like charges from a courtroom docket. 3 prior arrests, 2 in Arizona for impersonating law enforcement, 1 in Nevada for harassment. Fired from multiple private security firms for abusing authority. Civil suits scattered across both states. Intimidation, falsified incident reports. Stalking. My chest tightened as I stared at the monitor. And now he's here, living in our neighborhood. Sarah nodded grimly. He's been drifting state to state for years. Starts friendly, earns trust, then uses it to gain leverage. In some cases, he's taken over entire HOAs. My stomach dropped. So this isn't about the fence? No, she said sharply. This is about power and probably money. She clicked over to another database, this one listing business filings. 2 Nevada shell companies, both tied to the same mailing address and 1 man, Victor Hale. Who's that? I asked. Sarah's eyes hardened. A real estate investor, once investigated for property scams targeting military families. He preyed on homeowners under financial strain, pressured them into selling below value, then flipped the houses for profit. I swallowed. And you think Greg's working with him? Greg's the muscle. He stirs chaos, pushes violations, and divides neighbors so Hale can swoop in and rescue families from problem homes. She leaned back in her chair. We're not just facing a fraud. This is a full operation. I rubbed my temples. So, what do we do? She held up a small device the size of a deck of cards, a professional surveillance camera. We document everything. From here on out, every move Greg makes gets recorded. She slid 3 cameras from her bag. Motion sensors, night vision, audio capable. By mid-afternoon, she had them installed. One hidden in the branches of our front yard maple, another tucked under the eaves of the garage, and the last positioned inside, angled at the front door. That night, Sarah sat me down. Here's the plan. We let Greg think he's gaining ground. We don't rise to the bait. When he finally pushes too far, and he will, we'll have proof. Her tone was calm, but underneath it I heard steel, and maybe a trace of anticipation. Right then, I realized Greg Mitchell or Morrison, or whatever alias he used, had picked the wrong target. Sarah once told me people like Greg can't resist 2 things: attention and opportunity. Give them just enough and they'll expose themselves. The morning after she discovered his real name, Sarah got to work. Laptop open, phone at her side, she spun what she called the net. She began with the HOA group chat Greg had pushed on everyone, pretending it was for security. Sarah rarely touched it before, but now she posted a calculated message. Heads up, we've been asked to temporarily store county training equipment. Nothing serious, but deliveries may happen late at night. Please don't be alarmed if you see movement in our driveway. Vague, official sounding, just enough to raise suspicion. By noon, Greg had already screenshotted it and passed it along. Hours later, the garage camera pinged. Greg pacing the sidewalk across the street, phone glued to his ear, eyes locked on our house. That evening, Sarah staged another piece. With her sheriff credentials, she drafted a fake training inventory list. Nothing sensitive, just jargon heavy enough to sound real, and left it accidentally open on her laptop in full view of the front window. Isn't this a little much? I asked as she adjusted the blinds. Exactly, she smirked. Theatricality works on people who need excuses for bad behavior. Sure enough, at dawn, the maple tree camera caught Greg creeping onto our lawn, angling his phone to snap photos of her screen. Sarah saved the footage. Step 1 complete. That night, she contacted an old ally, Rodriguez, a retired FBI agent she'd worked with. Over a secure call, he confirmed what we already suspected. Victor Hale was still active, laundering property through straw buyers, with Mitchell acting as an enforcer. Enough to charge? Sarah asked. Not yet, but if we link his fake cop routine to Hale's companies, we can bring federal charges. When the call ended, Sarah tapped her pen thoughtfully. We'll feed him bait and see where it goes. Over the next 2 days, she built the trap. She created a fabricated memo addressed to Sheriff Sarah Walker from the fictitious County Tactical Division, describing a classified asset relocation. She slipped a printed copy into our unlocked mailbox. By nightfall, it was gone. The following morning, the garage camera showed Greg meeting a man in a silver SUV. They passed the memo back and forth, pointing toward our house. Sarah froze the footage, zooming on the license plate. That's Hale's vehicle, she whispered. He's here. That evening, she pushed harder, posting in the HOA chat again. Reminder, training delivery incoming within 72 hours. Please keep driveways clear. Within 20 minutes, another camera caught Greg pacing, phone pressed to his ear. You sure it's worth it? All right, I'll handle it. We'll move them before the drop. Sarah muted the recording and smirked. She had him exactly where she wanted him. That night over dinner, I asked what had been gnawing at me. What if this blows back? What? If they realize you're setting them up? She met my eyes, calm but deadly serious. Then we moved to step 3. And that is? Her lips curved in a cold smile. Public exposure, the kind you don't recover from. I didn't push for details. I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but I could feel the tide shifting. Greg thought he was cornering us. He didn't realize he was walking straight into Sarah's snare. By Friday, Greg was strutting around like a man already victorious. Inspection threats, whispers in driveways, staged authority. Sarah sipped her coffee and told me, "He'll call a public meeting. That's how these types secure control. Rally everyone, spin the story, and force sides." Sure enough, a flyer arrived that afternoon. Emergency HOA meeting. Saturday, 4 p.m., community dispute resolution. Attendance required. I groaned. It's bait. Sarah smiled thinly. No, it's opportunity. He thinks this will be my humiliation. Instead, it'll be his. Saturday arrived blazing hot, asphalt shimmering. By 3:50, nearly 30. Neighbors had gathered on the strip of grass in front of our house, folding chairs set in a loose semicircle, the largest turnout I'd ever seen. Greg appeared with false confidence, wearing a pressed navy polo, aviators, and his ever-present fake badge. Two of his inspectors shadowed him, clipboards in hand as if carrying legal authority. "Thank you all for coming," he began, loudly. "We're here because certain residents have failed to follow community rules. This isn't personal. It's about the safety and appearance of Oakwood Heights." He gestured toward our fence like it was a crime scene exhibit. 6 feet tall iron bars blocking sightlines. In my professional opinion, a security hazard. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the crowd as Greg stepped forward, planting himself in the center. "And that's not all," he announced. "My personal investigation shows Mrs. Sarah Walker is involved in activities that threaten national security." That was the moment Sarah calmly moved into view. She wore a fitted black blazer over a plain blouse, her hair neatly pulled back. No badge was pinned, no weapon was visible, just her steady, commanding presence that pulled every pair of eyes toward her. "Greg," she interrupted evenly, slicing through his speech. "Before we go further, I have a single request." He blinked, unsettled. "What's that?" "Show us your police ID number." The audience shifted uneasily. Greg gave a forced laugh. "That's confidential. I can't just hand that out." Sarah's tone didn't waver. "Every sworn officer in this county carries a badge number. It's public record. Producing it is standard." His jaw clenched. "I'm not required to." Sarah quietly turned to a folding table where a laptop and small speaker waited. With a few keystrokes, the HOA's projector displayed the county's official law enforcement roster on the screen. She scrolled steadily to the M's. "Here is the list of active officers in this county. As you can see, there's no Greg Morrison." The whispers rose louder. She clicked again, pulling up another document. "This," she said, "is a receipt for a counterfeit badge ordered from a costume shop, delivered to 742 Elmwood Drive. Greg's address, 8 months ago." Greg's face turned red. "That's fake!" Sarah didn't raise her voice, but her next words sliced through the tension. "And is this fake, too?" The image on the screen shifted to footage from our garage. Camera, Greg at 5:37 a.m. Phone out, photographing Sarah's training inventory. Gasps spread across the crowd. She played an audio clip next. Greg's voice muttering near our yard mic, "We'll get them out before the delivery date." Greg's composure cracked. He lunged forward, shouting, "She's twisting this! None of you understand." Sarah lifted her hand calmly. "What we do understand is you've been impersonating law enforcement, trespassing, and collaborating with known property scammers targeting military families." The crowd erupted in questions. Greg's so-called inspectors shrank back, visibly uneasy. Greg jabbed a finger toward Sarah. "You think you can embarrass me? You have no idea who I am." Sarah's eyes didn't waver. "No, Greg, you have no idea who I am." The tension pressed down like heavy air. I saw Greg's hands twitch, his body shifting like a cornered man ready to lash out. Sarah noticed too. Her stance subtly shifted, guarded. None of us knew the next second would involve a gunshot, a scream, and the fastest takedown I'd ever witness. Greg's movements grew sharper, his voice rising. The crowd leaned back from him now, not in support, but in fear. "She's dangerous," he barked, pointing at Sarah. "I've seen her files. She's trained to kill. When she snaps, you'll all regret it." His hand dropped suddenly toward his belt. Fingers curled around a pistol grip. Gasps tore through the audience. Someone screamed. Folding chairs screeched against pavement as people scrambled back. "Gun!" a voice shouted. Time seemed to slow. Greg drew the weapon, leveling it at Sarah with both hands, rage shaking his voice. "Shut up! Everyone listen to me!" Sarah didn't flinch. Her hands stayed visible at her sides, her voice low but cutting through the noise. "Greg, you just made the worst mistake of your life." I recognized her tone. It wasn't bravado, it was a judgment. She stepped forward once. "You're pointing a loaded gun at an elected officer in front of 30 witnesses and on live cameras." Dozens of phones hovered in the air. Neighbors were streaming it. Greg's eyes darted nervously at the cameras. "They don't know what's real." "They know enough," Sarah replied, "and your time is up." It happened faster than I could register. One heartbeat, Greg had the barrel trained on her chest. The next, Sarah was in motion, sliding sideways, striking his wrist, forcing the weapon skyward as her other hand wrenched the barrel away. The gun went off with a deafening crack, the echo slamming through my chest. Before panic could spread again, Sarah had stripped the gun from his hand, twisted his arm, and forced him face first into the grass. In under 3 seconds, Greg Morrison, the man who ruled this HOA like a tyrant, was pinned with Sarah's knee on his back and his wrists bound by black zip ties she produced from her pocket like she'd been prepared for this moment all along. The crowd was frozen except for a few ragged breaths from people who had scrambled together in fear. Sarah's voice rang out, steady and clear. "Greg Morrison, you're under arrest for impersonating a police officer, aggravated assault with a firearm, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Clapping began, hesitant, then growing stronger. The relief was palpable. Some neighbors were crying, others staring at Sarah like she'd just performed a miracle. Greg squirmed under her weight, spewing curses. "You fools! This isn't over. You don't know how deep this goes." Sarah didn't respond. She kept her eyes scanning the crowd, posture tense like she expected more. That's when I noticed. 2 of Greg's men were gone, slipped away in the commotion. Sarah must have caught it too. Without looking up, she said, "Daniel, call the sheriff. Tell them I've got one in custody, but 2 suspects are on the run, possibly armed." I already had my phone out dialing. Sirens wailed in the distance within minutes, and soon real deputies were swarming the scene. They aimed their weapons until Sarah identified herself, handing over the confiscated pistol. Detective Maria Santos, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, studied Greg and then Sarah. "We've been watching him for a while. You just gave us the evidence we needed." Greg was dragged to his feet, wrists still bound. He muttered angrily as he was shoved toward a patrol car. Just before being loaded in, he twisted his head toward Sarah. "You were marked long before you moved here. Next time, it won't be me." Sarah's expression didn't change, but I caught the hard edge in her eyes. The squad cars rolled off, and neighbors began dispersing, some in relief, some still buzzing from the chaos. For the first time in weeks, people approached Sarah to shake her hand, thanking her. She didn't smile. "It's not over," she said flatly. "Not until we know exactly who's behind this." She wasn't just speaking to them. She was speaking to me, too. Moments later, her phone buzzed. She stepped aside, speaking in clipped tones I could barely hear. "In custody, 2 at large. Vehicle confirmed." When she returned, her face was unreadable, that same calculating mask I'd seen before. "That was Captain Rodriguez," she told me. "A joint task force is being sent tomorrow." Greg wasn't a lone wolf. He's part of something bigger, and they've been closing in for months. I thought about Greg's chilling last words. You were targeted long before you moved here. He hadn't been lying about that part. Sarah shook her head, firm this time. That night, she spread her papers across the dining table. Property deeds, court records, business registrations. Some I'd seen earlier in the week, others were new. She pointed at a flowchart she'd carefully sketched. Here's the pattern, she explained. Mitchell Gregg singles out families, most often military or law enforcement, because they're steady, disciplined, and own property where Hale wants to expand. He fabricates charges against them, piling on fake fines, threats, and code citations. Eventually, the pressure forces them to sell. Sarah tapped the next box. That's when Hale swoops in, buying the house through shell companies, then flipping it for huge profits, over and over again. I followed one of the arrows. And how many times has this worked? I asked. She locked eyes with me. At least 40 families, across 6 states, possibly twice that. I leaned back, stunned. Why target military families? She didn't hesitate, because they're rule followers, unlikely to go public, often moving quietly under stress, and some even have clearances. Push them out and you control who lives near sensitive facilities. A chill ran through me. So this isn't just greed. No, she replied, flat. It's about power. By dawn, the task force arrived. Captain Rodriguez, tall and broad, with streaks of silver at his temples, greeted Sarah with a handshake that carried years of shared battles. You've just given us a breakthrough, he said. We've been trailing Gregg for 3 years. Turning to me, he added, that camera footage you saved? Priceless. I glanced at Sarah. Part of the bait, wasn't it? She gave a subtle nod. The next 2 days blurred together. Warrants hit Gregg's house and properties tied to Hale. Agents carried out boxes of documents, hard drives, and even a duffel of counterfeit police uniforms and IDs. One detective showed Sarah a tablet, loaded with files, names, habits, incomes, even kids' schools. Her jaw set. This isn't intimidation, it's surveillance. Meanwhile, the 2 inspectors who bolted from the HOA meeting were picked up in the next county. Both ex-security contractors with shady pasts, but clean enough to blend in. Confronted with evidence, they flipped instantly, naming Hale as the mastermind. 2 days later, he was arrested in Nevada stepping off a private jet. Within a week, the story exploded. Local stations parked trucks on our corner. National outlets called it the HOA sting. Reporters wanted headlines, neighbors wanted calm, and the sheriff's office wanted Sarah leading the charge. She gave a single statement. No title or badge gives anyone the right to bully a community for profit. If something feels wrong, speak up. That's how neighborhoods stay safe. Simple, steady, and it resonated. That night, when calm finally settled over our house, I asked her, "Is it finished?" She poured us water and answered, "The operation's done. The investigation will run for months, but Gregg and Hale won't be free anytime soon." I hesitated. And the part where Gregg said we were targeted before moving here? She was silent for a beat before admitting softly, "That's what I can't shake. If this was only about a fence, he wouldn't have pushed so hard. Someone wanted us gone. Specifically." Her tone told me she didn't have an answer or wasn't ready to share one. 6 weeks after Gregg's arrest, Oakwood Heights felt reborn. The tension that had weighed down every block vanished. Neighbors waved again, lingered at mailboxes, let kids play outside without scanning the street. The HOA now met in the community. Center with rotating leadership, transparent finances, and one ironclad rule. No one could hold any security title without a verified law enforcement background. It wasn't just regulation. It was armor forged from scars. Sarah refused. Leadership despite multiple nominations. Real leadership means empowering others, not ruling over them, she told the first meeting, drawing a standing ovation and later inspiring the slogan printed on flyers for our Unity Day barbecue. She did agree, however, to teach monthly safety classes. The first brought 20 residents, the next 40, and by the third, they had to move to the high school gym. She taught not just self-defense, but also how to spot fake authority, document suspicious behavior, and give law enforcement what they need to act. Her motto was clear: don't be paranoid, but don't be passive. Kids adored her. At Unity Day, they clung to her like she was a superhero in jeans and a ball cap. One boy asked her to teach him the move that bent a bad guy's arm. She laughed, promised a safer trick, then had him demonstrate the yell, name the threat, describe it drill. Watching her with them, I realized Greg hadn't just picked the wrong family. He'd strengthened the entire community by targeting the wrong neighbor. One evening, sitting on the porch by our still-standing fence, I asked if she regretted revealing who she really was. She took a sip of tea, gazing out. Some secrets are necessary, but sometimes truth is the safest gift you can give. Her eyes drifted toward the playground, now sporting a bronze plaque funded from Greg's seized assets, honoring those who protect community truth. Life slowly returned to normal, though reminders lingered. A postcard arrived from Virginia. Unsigned, reading only, "You stopped one. There are more." Sarah didn't alarm the neighbors. She locked it away, then phoned Rodriguez securely. Later, I found her late at night, scrolling names and addresses I didn't know. She smiled faintly, just keeping track. For our block, the chapter closed. Peace returned, the fence blended into the scenery, the HOA worked for us, and neighbors became friends. But normal was relative. One crisp autumn morning, I saw a white van slow roll past, the driver staring too long. Sarah noticed too. She didn't wave, didn't frown, just watched until it turned the corner, then locked the door. "Something?" I asked. "Probably nothing," she said, pausing. "But I'll keep watch." That was life with Sarah. Quiet could be the calm before another storm. At the next HOA meeting, she'd be there, sitting quietly in the back, ensuring no imposter ever tried flashing fake authority again. Because Sarah Walker, the woman Greg thought he could scare off, wasn't just my wife. She was the sheriff of this county. And I had learned this much. When she chooses to defend her people, she doesn't just win. She changes the field itself. And that's why the silence of Oakwood Heights felt less like closure and more like the beginning of something larger.